What if there was a place where roads disappear beneath snow for most of the year? A place where temperatures can fall below -50 degrees Celsius, yet families continue to travel hundreds of kilometers across the frozen Arctic, not in vehicles, but behind thousands of reindeer. What if home was never built on a foundation, but packed onto a sled and carried across an endless white wilderness? In a world where most people measure life by cities, buildings, and permanent addresses, there exists a community that measures life by seasons, migration, and the movement of their animals. Far above the Arctic Circle, stretching deep into northern Russia, lies the Yamal Peninsula, a vast land of frozen tundra, powerful winds, and endless horizons. During winter, the sun barely rises above the horizon. In summer, darkness almost disappears, replaced by weeks of continuous daylight. To many, this landscape seems too harsh for human life, but for thousands of years, it has been home. Here live the Nenets, one of the last great nomadic peoples of the Arctic. Every year, they guide massive herds of reindeer across more than 1,000 kilometers of frozen wilderness, following ancient migration routes that existed long before modern maps or national borders. Their lives revolve around the rhythm of nature. When the snow changes, they move. When the rivers freeze, they cross. When the seasons shift, an entire community packs its belongings, dismantles its tents, and begins another journey across one of the coldest regions on Earth. For the Nenets, movement is not a choice, it is survival. Yet beyond the breathtaking Arctic landscape lies something even more remarkable. A culture that has remained alive despite centuries of political change, industrial expansion, and the rapid arrival of the modern world. Because the Yamal Peninsula is more than a frozen wilderness. It is one of the last places where an ancient way of life still continues almost exactly as it did centuries ago. The Yamal Peninsula lies in northwestern Siberia, extending nearly 700 kilometers into the icy waters of the Kara Sea. The name Yamal comes from the Nenets language and means the end of the earth. Standing on its endless tundra, surrounded only by snow, wind, and distant herds of reindeer, it is easy to understand why. Unlike forests or mountains, the Arctic tundra appears almost empty at first glance. Trees are nearly absent. The ground remains frozen for most of the year, and the landscape stretches endlessly in every direction. But beneath this frozen surface lies one of the richest reserves of natural gas on the planet, making Yamal one of Russia's most strategically important regions. Despite its economic value, much of the peninsula remains untouched by cities. Vast areas have no permanent roads, no railways, and no modern settlements. Instead, nature continues to dictate how people travel, where they live, and when they move. For outsiders, Yamal represents isolation. For the Nenets, it represents home. The story of the Nenets began thousands of years ago, long before Russia expanded into Siberia and long before the modern world reached the Arctic. Archaeological evidence suggests that the ancestors of today's Nenets gradually adapted to one of the harshest environments on Earth, developing a lifestyle built around reindeer herding, seasonal migration, and an extraordinary understanding of the Arctic landscape. Generation after generation, this knowledge was passed down, not through books, but through experience.
We can remove the branches to slide better.
Children learn to read snowdrifts instead of road signs. They learn to predict changing weather by observing the sky, the wind, and the behavior of their animals. Every journey across the tundra carried lessons that would prepare the next generation for life in the Arctic. As centuries passed, powerful empires expanded across northern Eurasia, but the remote tundra allowed the Nenets to preserve much of their traditional way of life. Even during the Soviet era, when many indigenous communities were encouraged to settle permanently, large numbers of Nenets continued their seasonal migrations. Today, the Yamal Peninsula stands at the meeting point of two very different worlds. On one side lies one of the world's largest energy industries, powered by enormous gas fields and modern technology. On the other, ancient migration routes continue to cross the frozen tundra, guided not by satellite navigation, but by traditions refined over countless generations. And despite everything that has changed around them, the Nenets continue moving across the Arctic, just as their ancestors once did. Because here, at the very edge of the world, history is not something preserved inside museums. It is a journey that continues with every season. Their home, known as the Chum, reflects this remarkable mobility. Built from long wooden poles and covered with reindeer hides, it is designed to withstand powerful Arctic winds and extreme temperatures. Despite its simple appearance, the Chum provides warmth and protection throughout the long winter months. When the family prepares to migrate, it can be dismantled, packed onto sleds, and rebuilt at a new location within only a few hours. Inside the Chum, every space has a purpose. A stove placed in the center provides heat and serves as the heart of the home, while sleeping areas and household belongings are arranged according to long-established traditions. Even after centuries of change, the basic design of the Chum has remained almost unchanged because it continues to meet the demands of Arctic life. Community also plays an important role. Although families often travel separately, they remain closely connected through shared migration routes and traditions. During certain times of the year, groups meet to exchange news, celebrate important events, and strengthen the social bonds that have united Nenets communities for generations. This way of life demands constant adaptation. Weather conditions can change without warning. Grazing lands vary from season to season, and every migration presents new challenges. Yet the Nenets continue to follow the same seasonal rhythm that has guided their ancestors for hundreds of years. For them, nomadism is not simply a tradition preserved from the past. It is a living way of life that continues to shape every journey across the Arctic tundra. Winter is the greatest challenge. Temperatures regularly fall below -40 degrees Celsius, and during severe cold waves, they can approach -50 degrees Celsius. Powerful Arctic winds sweep across the open tundra, creating blizzards that reduce visibility to almost nothing. For days, the landscape can disappear beneath drifting snow, making travel dangerous even for those who have spent their entire lives in the region. Their reindeer must continue moving, feeding, and surviving regardless of the conditions. Every storm brings new risks, forcing families to make careful decisions that can determine the safety of both their animals and themselves. Preparing for winter begins long before the first snowfall. Equipment is repaired, sleds are strengthened, and families carefully organize the supplies they will need during the coldest months. The chum clothing is equally important. Rather than relying on modern synthetic materials, many Nenets continue to wear traditional garments made from reindeer fur. These handmade coats, boots, and gloves have been perfected over centuries and remain remarkably effective in Arctic conditions. Designed specifically for extreme cold, they provide warmth while allowing people to travel long distances across the tundra. Food also reflects the realities of life in the Arctic. Fresh vegetables are rare throughout much of the year, so the Nenets depend heavily on reindeer for nourishment. Meat, fish, and dairy products form the foundation of their diet, providing the energy needed to endure long days in freezing temperatures. Every available resource is used carefully, ensuring that very little goes to waste. Survival, however, depends on far more than food and shelter. Experience plays an equally important role. Nenets herders learn to recognize changing weather by observing the movement of clouds, the direction of the wind, and the behavior of their reindeer. These skills, passed from one generation to another, often provide the earliest warning of approaching storms. Even with generations of knowledge, nature remains unpredictable. Heavy snowfall can bury the moss and lichen that reindeer depend on for food, forcing herds to search for new grazing areas. Frozen layers of ice may prevent animals from reaching vegetation beneath the snow, creating serious challenges for both the herd and the families who rely on it. Yet despite these hardships, the Nenets continue to adapt, just as their ancestors have done for centuries. Their ability to live in one of the coldest inhabited regions on Earth is not the result of modern technology alone, but of knowledge, preparation, and an extraordinary understanding of the Arctic environment. For the Nenets, surviving winter is not an extraordinary achievement. It is simply another season in a way of life that has endured across the frozen tundra for generations. The culture of the Nenets has been shaped by centuries of life on the Arctic tundra. While the frozen landscape may appear empty, it is deeply connected to their traditions, beliefs, and daily routines. Every journey, every migration, and every generation has helped preserve a way of life that remains closely tied to nature. Family is at the center of Nenet society. Life on the tundra requires cooperation, and every member of the household has an important role. Men generally lead the reindeer during migration, repair sleds, and travel across long distances, while women manage the chum, prepare meals, make clothing, and care for children. Although responsibilities differ, survival depends on the efforts of the entire family. Children begin learning from an early age, childhood observing parents and grandparents. They learn how to handle reindeer, build a chum, prepare traditional food, and recognize the changing conditions of the Arctic. These practical skills become part of everyday life, ensuring that knowledge is passed naturally from one generation to the next. The reindeer is more than an animal within Nenet's culture. It is deeply connected to their identity, traditions, and history. Many celebrations, family gatherings, and seasonal events revolve around the care of the herd. For centuries, the relationship between people and reindeer has been built on respect, understanding, and dependence, creating a bond that continues to define life across the Yamal Peninsula. Traditional clothing also reflects this close relationship with nature. These handmade garments provide exceptional protection against freezing temperatures and powerful winds. Even today, many families continue to wear traditional clothing because it remains better suited to the environment than many modern alternatives. Despite living far from towns and cities, the Nenets maintain strong social connections. During seasonal gatherings, families meet, celebrate important occasions, arrange marriages, and strengthen relationships that have existed for generations. These gatherings help preserve traditions while reinforcing the sense of community that has always been essential to nomadic life. Music, storytelling, and oral traditions also remain an important part of Nenets' culture. Stories about ancestors, legendary journeys, and life on the tundra are shared from one generation to another, preserving history without written records. Through these traditions, children grow up understanding not only where they come from, but also the values that have allowed their people to survive for centuries. Although the modern world continues to reach even the most remote parts of the Arctic, the cultural identity of the Nenets remains remarkably strong. Their traditions continue to shape everyday life, connecting the past with the present through family, community, and an enduring respect for nature. For the Nenets, culture is not something remembered only through history. It is something lived every day across the endless tundra of the Yamal Peninsula. For thousands of years, the Yamal Peninsula changed very little. The seasons came and went. The reindeer continued their migration, and the Nenets followed the same ancient routes across the Arctic tundra. But today, a different kind of change is spreading across this frozen land. Not through nature, but through industry. Beneath the frozen ground of Yamal lies one of the largest natural gas reserves in the world. Over the past few decades, this remote peninsula has become one of Russia's most important energy regions. Massive gas fields, pipelines, railways, and industrial settlements have transformed parts of the Arctic that were once crossed only by migrating reindeer. For the global economy, these resources are extremely valuable. For the Nenets, however, they have brought new challenges. Traditional migration routes now pass near industrial facilities, roads, and pipelines that did not exist only a few decades ago. In some areas, herders are forced to adjust journeys that their families have followed for generations. Although many projects include designated crossing points for reindeer, the landscape continues to change, requiring constant adaptation. Another challenge comes from the Arctic itself. Climate change is gradually reshaping one of the coldest regions on Earth. Winters are becoming less predictable, while periods of unusual warmth affect the frozen ground that has supported Arctic life for thousands of years. The Yamal Peninsula is covered by permafrost, soil that normally remains frozen throughout the year. As temperatures rise, parts of this frozen ground begin to thaw, changing rivers, lakes, and migration routes that the Nenets have depended upon for centuries. These environmental changes also affect the reindeer. The growth of grazing vegetation is becoming less predictable, while unusual weather events can create thick layers of ice over the tundra. When this happens, reindeer struggle to reach the moss and lichen beneath the surface, making food harder to find during the winter months. Yet, despite these growing challenges, the Nenets continue to preserve their traditions. Many families still migrate across the Arctic every year, teaching their children the same skills their grandparents once learned. Modern technology has entered parts of their lives, with snowmobiles, satellite phones, and GPS sometimes assisting long journeys. But the foundation of their culture remains unchanged. The reindeer still lead the way. The chum is still raised wherever the family stops. And the rhythm of life continues to follow the changing seasons. The future of the Yamal Peninsula will likely be shaped by both tradition and change. Economic development will continue, climate conditions will evolve, and younger generations will face new opportunities beyond the tundra. For centuries, they have endured freezing winters, endless migrations, political change, and some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Through every challenge, they have continued moving forward, carrying with them a way of life that few places in the modern world have managed to preserve. As the Arctic wind sweeps across the endless white horizon, another migration quietly begins. Reindeer move toward distant grazing lands. Sleds leave fresh tracks across the snow, and families continue a journey that has connected people with this landscape for countless generations. In a world that is changing faster than ever before, the Yamal Peninsula reminds us that progress is not only measured by technology or cities. Sometimes, true strength is found in preserving the wisdom of the past. Because in the end, the story of the Yamal Peninsula is not only about the Arctic. It is about the enduring relationship between people, nature, and a tradition that continues to survive at the very edge of the world. If you enjoyed exploring one of the world's last great nomadic cultures, consider subscribing for more documentaries from the planet's most remote and extraordinary places. There are still many hidden worlds waiting to be discovered.